Welcome back to Everyday Iowa. It's time for another Everyday Iowa Reads with Next Page Books. Our book bestie Bart is here, and of course, the #1 employee, Frank. We're going to discuss this month's book, which is loaded with characters.
Yes.
The God of the Woods.
Yep.
Do you want to tell them that I finished the book?
You did, which is, but you finished most of them. It might be important really quickly to, so people know that maybe haven't read the book. This is about a wealthy family that has a large estate in the Adirondack Mountains in upstate New York. They run a summer camp, and over the course of 14 years, 2 of their children have gone missing. So that's sort of the premise of the book.
Yes.
And there's a lot of characters in this book, so let's start with those. Did you find that overwhelming with all the characters in the book? Or?
Honestly, no. I typically, in these types of books where they switch back and forth, I get disappointed when one story goes to another character because I want to hear more, or I don't love that character's story or voice. But this, no. I really thought she kept it concise. None of the characters had too long of chapters, and it wasn't confusing, even though when we talk about it afterwards, it's hard.
Confusing.
Yes.
Yeah, it
so
was.
I think she did a good job.
Well, I was a little bit confused at first, and so I printed out a cheat sheet just to be able to keep track.
Yeah.
Right.
Because each chapter is from a different character's perspective. And initially that was confusing to me. And because it jumped around just a little bit in time. But once I got into the book, it wasn't an issue.
And and that she does tell you what year at the top of each, when it switches from character.
That's helpful too, so you kind of keep track, because sometimes I have a hard time with that. Okay, we want to talk about Barbara and Bear, of course. Those were the 2 children who went missing. Let's talk about the relationship between Bear and his parents versus Barbara and her parents, because it's very complicated.
Well,
1975 is when the story takes place, but 14 years prior to that, their 10-year-old son Bear went missing. And Bear, I think, was intended to be the heir apparent to the family fortune and the banking. And so when he disappeared, they wanted to have another child, but they had a daughter. And in that era, I don't think they perceived Barbara as someone who would be able to step in and take over the family business.
she was pretty much ignored by her parents, which was a lot of the book. They really, and how much the mother loved the son. And of course there's trauma for losing the child, and just in general her position in that household. So when Barbara is born, she is not a well person, but they are not kind to Barbara.
No, and they're not kind to her mother either.
No. And I think what was interesting is Barbara was 13 when the story takes place. So she's a teenager. She's at that age where she's going to be a little bit rebellious anyway.
Right.
But she was into punk.
I know, such a new thing.
And for that area of New York, no one really understood what that was. And at the camp, only those children who came up from Manhattan, Long Island, understood how she was dressing and what she would
But Barbara was a very mature character too, unlike Bear, who seemed very childlike and babied. And so it was just a very different experience for the 2 kids, and they do end up, it's a very different ending for both of them.
Yes.
But,
I know, we kind of want to talk about that too, because the ending, did you see that ending coming? There were so many suspects in this. Did you have any idea? Did your suspect change?
All the time. I thought I knew. I was like, haha, I figured it out. Bart said you would not know. And then when the camp counselor, TJ, I was like, oh, this is not good. And I thought I figured it out, and I didn't.
You didn't?
Well, but I think that was a sign of a good book, where I went through the entire book, and until the end, I had no idea. I stopped trying to figure it out or try to guess who it might have been. So I was really shocked at the end to learn what happened to both Bear and Barbara.
And there's a lot of, and it ties in nicely with the time periods, the 50s and the 70s. I think they do a good job of telling you what happened. And you're like, oh yeah, that character died, but this is what happened.
I know. So there's so many characters. We could talk about this for like half an hour. I think we did on Monday when we were meeting. There were so many things to talk about. So
if I have just a real quick minute, a lot of customers have come in and asked me about the title of the book, The God of the Woods. And there's a very short passage when they're in the woods for survival training where the lead counselor tells them the word panic comes from the Greek god Pan, who was the god of the woods. And when you're in the woods, if you panic, the woods will turn against you. But if you remain calm, they will be your friend.
Yes.
And I think that is sort of a good metaphor for the overall
That is a good
book.
metaphor.
Yes, I love that.
All right, we have 30 seconds here, so let's find out what we're going to be reading for October.
Well, because it's October, I thought it
Yeah.
might be a good idea to do a bit of a scary or horror book.
Yeah.
So The September House
Okay.
by Carissa Orlando. It was nominated for a Goodreads Horror Book of the Year last year.
Okay.
And I have several customers who have already read it. They absolutely loved it.
All right.
So if you like
Yes.
the horror genre, this is a book for you.
perfect.
Yep.
Yes. So head to Next Page Books there in Nubo and get your copy of The September
Yes.
House, and we'll read that and review it the first week of November.
Yes,
Yeah.
and you can
Oh
always
my
write to
God.
us and tell us what you think of these books
Absolutely.
as well.
Yeah, thank you
you.
so much.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. And let's turn over